In this lesson, we're going to look at how to play chords in the piano. And the first thing to think about with chords is that we want to keep our fingers curved like this. We want to avoid the finger going against the knuckle like that, pushing backward. That's just not a natural way for the hand to work, and it's also uncomfortable, and there's an added danger that you might slip off a note. So you want to keep relatively strong, firm fingers like that, curved. Pretend you're holding a ball or a grapefruit, and then just turn your hand over. And you want to go from the tops of the keys down to the key bed, and use your wrist as a shock absorber. It should be like this. And that will produce a very nice tone for your chords. In the left hand, same thing applies. You'll keep your fingers curved, and you'll just drop your hand from the wrist, keeping strong fingers and curved knuckles like this. Now, a lot of our chords are going to be in root position. That means that the lowest note of the chord is the chord note name. So for a C major chord, which the notes are C, E, and G, C, E, and G, the lowest note of the chord will be a C. You've got the C right there. That's called root position. Now, for these three-note chords, there are two other basic versions of the chords where we're using the same letter names, still C, E, and G, but we're putting the letters, the notes, in a different order. So we can start with the E, the second note of the chord, in a C major chord, and it will be called a first inversion chord. And the sound of that is like this: E, G, and C. And if you play them together, it will sound like that. So if we listen to the difference between the root position C chord, it's like this, and then the first inversion C major chord, it's like this. Now we have another basic version where we would start on the third note of the chord. So it will be the G in this case. So you could have C, E, G, your third note of the chord, and if we make a chord with the third note as the lowest, the G, then it's going to be called a second inversion chord, and it will sound like this. So you have the notes G, C, and E. So here are the three basic versions of any three-note chord. The root position, where the note, the chord, the root note, for instance C in a C major chord, is the lowest. Sounds like that all together, and this way arpeggiated, or played one note at a time. The next chord is based on the second note of the chord. It's called a first inversion. In this case, it would be based on the E. And it's going to sound like this, arpeggiated, and this all together. And the last version that we're going to look at is the second inversion. It's going to use the G, the third note of the chord, in the bass as the lowest note, and it will sound like this. Now all three-note chords work this way, so if we had a C minor chord, it's going to sound like this, a little gloomy and dark. And this will have still the C in the bass for the root position. Then first inversion will sound like this. with the E flat, the second note of the chord in the bass, and second inversion will have the G, or the third note of the chord in the bass. And it will sound like this altogether. That's root position, here's first inversion, and here's second inversion. And it's the same for either hand. So here's the C minor chord in root position with the right hand. Here's the first inversion of the C minor chord. And here's the second inversion of the C minor chord in the right hand. So you'll see these chords throughout the songs and pieces in the book, and just start to make a note of them.